Hi everyone, my name is Jen Kober, and I'm an adolescent psychiatric nurse, and I love it. One of my duties is to educate adolescent patients on the physiological effects of mental health. Before I get into the discussion of actual mental health, I wanted to share something personal about me. I suffer from generalized anxiety disorder. I was diagnosed about a year ago, but I've probably been suffering with this my whole life. Imagine being 7 years old and you're carefree and riding your bikes and playing in the grass with your friends. Now I want you to close your eyes and imagine a different 7-year-old who is under her covers night after night, all night long, rehearsing spelling lists and math problems because you want to get it right, so you do it over and over and over again. Can you say obsessive? The lack of sleep, the determination, these all come with anxiety. Now, I like to start out with this because I feel it's important for people to understand that I come from a real personal experience with mental health issues. The minute I say I have generalized anxiety disorder, I will be dismissed by certain members of the population. We've all experienced this, the stigma that comes with understanding you have a mental health disorder. But for me, I prefer to be open and honest and say this is where I'm coming from a real place of concern and care and understanding. I'd like to first discuss the physiological factors of mental health, especially with the patients I work with, because when we learn about brain functionality, it makes it easier to understand. There are so many things we don't yet know about the brain, and they're discovering them daily. You know, if you go to a doctor's office and you get diagnosed with, let's say, heart disease, they can do a scan. They can clear out those clogged arteries. Maybe they're prescribing you some medication, asking you to reduce your sodium intake, and giving you some exercise tips. The brain doesn't work that way, okay? It has multifaceted levels where you have to do a lot of trial and error with your doctor, your psychiatrist, and your therapist before you're able to properly be diagnosed and then treated effectively. So when we talk about the brain, and I like to teach my patients about the different parts of the brain, I keep things pretty simple, mostly because when I was in nursing school, that's how I was able to remember things, and I like to think that if I can remember things this way, maybe it's easier for other people to understand too. The two parts of the brain that I'd like to discuss today are the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala. The prefrontal cortex is located right here, behind the forehead, and we like to talk about it as our thinking brain. It helps us to determine right from wrong, make decisions, follow directions, and set goals. This isn't fully developed in most people until they're about 25, so it makes sense why teenagers and young adults sometimes make poor choices. That brain is still getting ready to be an adult. So somewhere in the middle, kind of back here, is called the amygdala. Now, I don't have a PhD in neurology. I'm not going to get into all of those things, but I'm just kind of telling you what I understand. I like to joke with my patients that we call it the Amy G. Dalla because it helps them to remember the name, and it also helps their spelling, which I find important. As a matter of fact, I was talking to my friend about my speech last week, just getting some tips, and I told her this, and the next morning she texted me, Jen, do you want to know what I can't get out of my head? Capital letters, Amy G. Dalla. So my theory about making serious topics silly does tend to help them stick. The amygdala has a very important job. Its job is to recognize where there is danger in our lives. So if I'm in the woods and there's a bear or there's a wolf, I want that amygdala to be on point. The amygdala then sends a signal and to the adrenal glands, which are located right above the kidneys. And they create a response to pump your body full of adrenaline and then that really important stress hormone cortisol. Because you're getting to run or fight. There's a very physical response that comes with this as well. Once certain organs are hit with these hormones, they have their own set of responsibilities. The eyes become much more focused, almost like tunnel vision. You start to sweat because the sweat glands have been signaled to reduce the water in your body so that your digestive tract doesn't have to work as hard as it needs to normally. This also means you might start to feel kind of nauseous. Your heart starts to race and pump faster, so your body can have blood pumping through the veins as fast as possible, and then it's also signaling your lungs to breathe faster, because your lungs recognize you need to breathe faster to get in more oxygen, to send oxygenated blood to the vessels, so that you have the best chance of survival. Also, the amygdala shuts down the prefrontal cortex when it's activated. That no longer wants you making decisions. So it's basically saying, nope, I got this. Guys, I might be too old, but do you remember in the 90s when you used to say, don't talk to the hand? That's kind of what the amygdala does to the prefrontal cortex when it's activated. Now, we need this response. It's a great response. But what happens with mental health disorders, especially generalized anxiety disorder, it's nonstop. It's over and it's over and it's over again. You have panic attacks nonstop with no real danger lurking around the corner. Our prefrontal cortex, therefore, is shut down so much it can't help us to make the right decision, so we don't even understand what's going on. So when we have a friend that says, dude, I know how to help you. Just take this pill. Come on to the bar and take a shot. Come back to my apartment, let's go smoke a joint. You're going to say yes. Even though your prefrontal cortex is like, no, what are you doing? Because it doesn't have the functionality it normally should, because you're constantly in that state of fight or flight. This is also, by the way, why mental health disorders and addiction sometimes go so strongly hand in hand. Now you might be thinking, who cares? Why is she even talking about the brain and its functions? I didn't come here to attend health class. Isn't she supposed to be giving us some heartfelt story about how it's our duty as Christians in the 21st century to be more kind to others and accepting of anybody with mental health conditions? Well, technically, yes. But I'm a firm believer that if you can understand where something begins and why it's happening, and why someone might be responding or acting in a way you don't get, you might think is inappropriate or maybe over the top, you might have a strong inkling to just simply be kind, because now you understand, oh, they got something going on inside. Our brain is unlike any other organ in the body in that it forces other organs to react in certain ways. Other organs of the body have one function, and regardless of what's happening to any of their organ neighbors, everywhere in the body, it's going to continue to complete that one duty, one responsibility. The brain, however, can elicit responses for other organs to then overperform when it's activated. It therefore makes sense that if someone's in a mental health crisis related to their brain having some difficulty, other organs are going to have difficulty as well. And then, when the prefrontal cortex isn't making the right decisions for you, you're making bad decisions, which is also further exacerbating the problems you're having in certain areas of your body. When we can see the link between the physiological changes of the brain related to mental illness, to how it is creating the body to react, and then combine it with maybe some outbursts, personality changes, or oddly displayed behaviors that accompany these changes in the brain, a light switch can go off in our heads. Going back to that heart disease example, the person suffering before receiving treatment for heart disease had a whole list of symptoms that the doctor had to use, right? Maybe they were having chest pain, difficulty performing physical tasks, very simple daily day-to-life stuff. Be maybe irritable or moody. Maybe they have heartburn or headaches. When we connect the dots about the symptoms to a disease, which is all part of the diagnosis, by the way, which doctors use, this can then link our ability to reach out in a more understanding, compassionate way. So the question then really becomes, what can we do to help someone suffering from mental illness? It comes back to that K word, kindness. You might say, sure, Jen, it's easy for you to reach out. You literally work in this field. Well, yeah, but you don't have to totally understand what's happening in another person's life or in their health in order to simply be kind to them. As Christians, we have an obligation to support all of God's people, not just those that we can easily relate to. It takes an incredibly small amount of effort to extend kindness to another person. And if that kindness turns into a friendship, and then that friendship can turn into a trust, that person that so desperately needs help may turn to you for that support. This provides an opportunity for you to then get the help the person needs, whether it's getting them into a support group, getting them to a doctor's appointment, or encouraging them to go to therapy. For me, with my anxiety, it took a very close friend who I trusted to recognize my symptoms and take me aside and say, enough is enough. You need to go see your doctor. This is not okay. That friend was very kind to me and helped me ease my fears of having to tell my doctor my symptoms and the things that I was going through. Because even though I'm a medical professional and I understand this stuff, I also understand the stigma that comes with this and the shame that we sometimes feel when we have something going on in our brains that we don't understand. As a church, being involved in this way for the surrounding community is imperative, especially in the world's climate today. The WISE team here at Ebenezer is opening those doors, extending those hands into the community. They're reaching out with kindness, with compassion. They are saying we are a safe place to talk about the hard stuff. There's no judgment. There's only care and concern. Thank you for your time, and may God bless you.